Welcome to Cybersecurity Heroes, an IRONSCALES podcast about you, the heroes of cybersecurity. You're about to hear and learn practical and experiential knowledge in our conversations with CISOs, security directors and architects, SOC analysts, and other Infosec stars so we can become more cyber resilient and safer together. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to Cybersecurity Heroes. I'm your host for today's episode, Brendan Rudd, Community Director at IRONSCALES, an email security platform powered by AI, enhanced by thousands of customer security teams, and built around detecting and removing threats in the inbox. We offer a service that is fast to deploy, easy to operate, and is unparalleled in the ability to stop all types of email threats, including advanced attacks like business email compromise, account takeover, and more. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get into the show.
Hey Eyal, welcome back to the show.
Hi Brendan, great to be here again.
Great to have you back again. We were discussing, you and I, that we're going to introduce another complimentary weekly or bi-weekly episode to Cybersecurity Heroes. You being our fearless thought leader and leader.
So today we wanted to chat about the infosecurity managers that are under pressure to find and fill demand with skilled professionals that can hit the ground running. But all the skilled professionals are expensive, hard to find, and get snapped up quickly in the market. What are some of the alternative solutions that you are proposing?
I think it's like you said, obviously we are experiencing some shortage of cybersecurity professionals, and they're becoming more and more expensive. And on the other hand, we find them kind of dealing with the more tedious kinds of laborious, repetitive tasks that not necessarily requires that level of competency or skill set. And the way I say the question is always, how can we make sure that the people that we hire to our team can really use their brain power and capabilities in order to deal with the harder, the more complicated task within the organization, and leave the important yet more entry-level kind of tasks to other people by leveraging the right tools. My background is technical. I was a developer for many years, and it's always reminding me the days that we had to kind of write from scratch everything that we were using. If you wanted to implement a connection pool in order to be able to use existing connections to database and stuff like that, you had to go and implement it yourself until the day that framework started to pop, and then you just had to learn how to use them properly and not necessarily how to build them. So learning how to use things, assuming you understand the basics and the fundamentals, are making it much easier for people to be able to do their day-to-day task without doing all the heavy lifting of building or reinventing the wheel in this case.
So what you're proposing is that we should build and train entry-level InfoSec graduates up with phishing incident response skills, because this is not hard to teach and can be learned pretty quickly compared to other security expertise, right?
Yeah, being involved in threat hunting doesn't necessarily mean that you need to understand the bits and bytes of everything that you're chasing. It does mean that you know how to leverage on the right tools in order to come with the right decision, be able to extract the right insights and basically connect the dot and decide whether it's something that you want to take action on. And today there are many great tools that are doing most of the heavy lifting for you, and I think that companies should definitely leverage on them. Not just in order to expedite things and make them easier, but in order to allow to close the gap or the shortage by enabling people that doesn't necessarily have a very heavy background in cybersecurity to take ownership and responsibility on super important things. For example, in investigating a potential phishing email without necessarily have 3 or 4 years of experience in industry, but just by following pretty simple guidelines aided by the right tools that will really help them quickly realize whether this is something that they should worry about or not, and help them to take action.
Phishing is still the number one attack vector from your conversations with CISOs, and the biggest problem, the amount of return on investment for training entry-level folks versus the problems you're solving, I think it's a no-brainer, but curious to know what you think about that.
No, I think you're totally right. We don't necessarily need people with 3, 4, 5 years experience and deep understanding in malware, how it's working, how it's penetrating the network, how it's remaining persistence, and these kinds of low level things that normally require like people to be in the business and understand really deeply the mechanism behind many of the things that are happening behind the scenes. But to teach someone how to read a message and trying to understand intent. This is basic human skills. You don't need to be cybersecurity expert to understand someone the structure or the metadata behind email, whether it's a my message, understand what is the header, how headers looks like normally. Um, you don't need 3 or 4 years of experience in order to understand these kinds of things and to read the results of a sandbox environment to see what's the bottom line regarding whether we see a malicious indication of compromise or any malicious activity. Again, these things are fundamental in the way that we are deciding whether something is malicious or not, but doesn't necessarily require a long training session. We can pretty quickly teach people on how to do it. And if you put the right tools in their hands, the tools can do all the heavy lifting and automate most of the stuff that they should have done otherwise, and just leave them with a very easy way to just pass judgment and not pass a verdict and not necessarily do the investigation and dig into the weeds.
And if we will get even more creative with this idea, do you think that this could even be handled by interns, people like straight out of, college, put them in an intern program, get them excited about cybersecurity?
For sure. I think you can, within a day, you can train people to be super effective and productive, solving one of the biggest problems that companies are dealing with no prior knowledge and no background whatsoever.
What do you think are the obstacles preventing hiring managers, from investing in email security training for entry-level folks? Like, why don't they have this function in-house?
Because I feel that the way it's being perceived now is that dealing with incidents, or with specifically with phishing incidents, is something that people are doing on top of their kinds of the stuff that they were assigned to do or they were hired to do. So it's always something that you do on top. We don't see many companies out there kinds of having dedicated people to deal with this specific problem, and then they get into the position that you're hiring super expensive and capable or skilled people, and then you ask them to go and run the more tedious and low level task, and it's really contributing to the fact that just feeling overworked and feeling that most of the time they're dealing with the stuff that it's simply not interesting, and this is not where they need to focus their attention.
Yeah, I definitely can see that it can annoy more experienced folks. Like, I don't want to do this dirty work.
It's annoying, it's wearing them out, and it's really getting them to feel that their time and skill set is not being utilized properly.
So again, why don't companies hire juniors and train them specifically on this function? Surely it can't be that much work.
I think it's with the realization that you don't need to hire necessarily only full stack security operation people or the Swiss Army kind of knife of the SecOps. You can definitely segment the way you're running your operation and really trying to determine what is entry level, what is mid level, and what is high level, in the sense that you are building and strategizing the structure behind your organization. And once you do that, you will really need to pick those different tasks that can be done by each one of those professionals. Look for the right training, hopefully self-training stuff that they can go to in order for them to be productive in their work. Now, technically speaking, most of the things or most of the tasks that need to be run by security operation will require skilled people, seasoned people, but there are some specific tasks that are day-to-day tasks and run by security operation system that are definitely an opportunity for entry-level people or people with no background, and for the organization to tackle. Like we said, some of them are big problems like phishing that we feel that can be solved with the right approach, right people, and the right tools.
And in your opinion, like how long do you think it would take to train up someone with no skills or experience to do phishing incident response to a certain point that a junior could do that would be worth the investment? And how long would it take, do you think, to train them up?
I think that with a couple of days, I talk about 2 3 days, you can get people to the point that they have the knowledge of how to do it. They know how to use the right tools or tool in order to achieve this task, and they were running in a sandbox environment to resolve enough incidents for them to be certified to the point that the organization can trust them to run this task.
Because you are the best person to ask this question because you built an email security platform. So you know the sequence, the kill chain sequence for phishing incident response. So I would assume you're confident when you say you can teach a junior in 2 or 3 days how to do those step-by-step process.
Yeah, we know it for a fact, and we see it, and we saw it in the past. To the degree that companies were offloading this task from the security operations to the help desk to be able to deal with these kinds of tasks. And I even seen some cases where the personal assistant of the CISO was doing the phishing, incident resolving kind of things. I've seen it all, and I think the proof is basically in the fact that it's not just a theory. It was and still being done, and we see it every day.
You recently came back from a summit and you were speaking with a lot of CISOs, and you said the consensus was that phishing is still the number one attack vector and challenge to solve. So, what conversations were you having with CISOs, and what were some of the topics that you were discussing with them?
So for me, it was mostly about learning and hearing from them what's top of mind, what are the challenges, and how they're dealing with these challenges. Like, what kind of solutions and process they have in place in order to deal with email phishing. I can tell you that all but one said that no matter what they have in place, phishing is still a problem. It's still a concern. It's still something that they are or that are constantly looking for new ways to solve. Obviously, as you can imagine, business email compromise and the insider threat and account takeover are the ones that they mentioned to me in specific. We know that all these fileless, linkless attacks, social engineering, and fraud is really trending up these days. And the kind of attacks are really, that at the end of the day, really find the way and sneaking to filters and gateways to employees' mailboxes. And they are not volumetric, they are very precise, targeted, and specific, but we realize that it's the 1% of the attacks that are creating 90% of the damage out there. And I think that probably the biggest observation is that, like I mentioned, they're always looking for new ways to solve this problem. The threat landscape is changing, the type of attacks is changing constantly. The potential outcome can be devastating. Companies wiring money to the wrong account or paying fake invoices and stuff like that. This is definitely something that is a big concern to this organization. And like we said earlier, like this operational burden that it's adding to their teams in the shape of how and who should attend these alerts, whether it's coming from the users or from different systems in order to pass a verdict and make a decision. This is definitely something that they're struggling with. Some of them mentioned that they need to deal with hundreds of incidents a day, and they have dedicated teams that are doing.
When you talked to them about automation, ease of use, kind of being more predictable in your detection, helping with offense versus always being on defense, what were their responses? How did they take that? Were they skeptical, or what was their responses?
So automation is, as you can imagine, it's very relative. Like, sometimes people feel that they achieved a good level of automation because they're scripting some stuff together and gluing some of the pieces together to the sense that it gives them some sense of process or an automated streamlined process. We as people, we don't know what we don't know. And it was very interesting to discuss with them what automation can really look like, what are the different levels of automation that we can achieve out there in order to reduce the burden and improve the time to detect and time to respond even further. And I can definitely say that most of the people that I was speaking with were not fully aware to the fact that things can be done in a much faster, better way that they were doing
I know we're going to do a separate episode on the Gartner email market guide, so we'll break down all the differences between the secure email gateways and the API technologies. But before we close out today's episode, is there anything you want to add before we wrap this one up?
I think that generally speaking, there is better sense of understanding that things are changing and things are changing pretty fast, and we really need to take a much more nimble and agile approach to the problem, and that it's very hard to build something that we know that will last for forever or for a year or two. It's rapidly changing. The attackers, the techniques that they're using. You mentioned automation, by the way. There is lots of automation on their side, including some AI capabilities that were built to mimic and design highly precise and very sophisticated phishing emails attacks that are using social media and doing some automated reconnaissance and information gathering in order to create highly convincing emails, which are obviously a very, very big challenge. So I think that fact, including some other things and shifts in the market that is happening currently, is something that defenders need to keep as top of mind.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll be having you back more frequently to do some more thought leadership.
See you soon, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Eyal. Have a good one.
Thank you.
And to the rest of you, we'll see you next time.
That's a wrap for this episode of Cybersecurity Heroes. Practical and experiential knowledge on a day in the life of security heroes. Catch our next episode by subscribing through your favorite podcast platform. If you're listening in Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating for the show. They really help a lot. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.